In November 1995, a 23-year-old musician in Bristol, England, received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single typed note and a bank draft for £5,000. The note said three things. It said, "This is for your music." It said, "Don't stop." And it said, "Don't try to find out who sent this." Daniel Webb spent the next 20 years trying to figure out who had sent that envelope. He asked everyone he knew. He hired a researcher. He went through every connection he had ever made, every meeting, every show he had played at dingy pubs and half-empty venues across the south of England. Nothing. He used the money to record his first album. It came out in 1996. It sold 1,200 copies, which, by his own account, was more than he had ever dreamed of. He kept the note folded in his wallet for 20 years. He showed it to nobody. In 2015, he finally found out who had sent it. And what he learned changed the way he understood not just his own life, but the life of the man who had quietly, anonymously, made it possible. This is the story of that envelope. Daniel Webb grew up in a terraced house in Barton Hill, Bristol. His father worked in manufacturing. His mother cleaned offices. There was no music in the house in any professional sense, but there was always sound. Radio in the kitchen, a second-hand record player in the living room with scratched albums bought at car boot sales. When Daniel was 9, he found a cassette of Thriller on the pavement outside a newsagent. He brought it home, cleaned it off, played it on his mother's player, and then played it again. He didn't become a Michael Jackson imitator. He became a songwriter. He was drawn to something in those songs he couldn't name at the time. The way the music made room for both joy and grief at the same time. The way it never chose one over the other. By 16, he was writing his own songs. By 18, he was playing them in pubs that tolerated underage performers, if you showed up early enough and asked nicely enough. By 22, he had recorded a 4-track demo that a small independent label in Bristol had listened to, appreciated, and ultimately passed on. He had been about to give up. Not in the dramatic way that people claim they were about to give up, literally. He had applied for a job in a warehouse. He was going to start the following Monday. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. He remembered exactly what it felt like to open it. He had been sitting at the small table in his flat, eating toast, sorting through bills. The envelope had been between a water statement and a pizza delivery leaflet. It was addressed by hand in a careful block print script. His full name, his address, the postcode. Nothing else on the outside. He opened it. The bank draft was made out to him directly. £5,000. From an account he didn't recognize, routed through a law firm in Los Angeles. He read the note 3 times. Then he put it down. Then he picked it up again. His first assumption was that it was a mistake, that someone had sent it to the wrong Daniel Webb. He spent 2 days trying to find out if there was another Daniel Webb in Bristol who might have been the intended recipient. There wasn't. He called the law firm. A polite assistant told him that the transaction was legitimate and intentional, and that the sender had specifically requested anonymity. When Daniel pushed for even a hint, the assistant said, "I can only tell you that this person is aware of your music and genuinely wishes you well." He didn't take the warehouse job. He went into a recording studio instead. He held on to the note like it was a contract, not with whoever sent it, but with himself. A promise to take it seriously, to actually try. The album he recorded in 1996 was called Ordinary Hours. 12 songs, acoustic guitar and piano, a few layered harmonies, lyrics that sounded like letters he had written to himself during the worst years. It did not make him famous. He knew it wouldn't. The independent label that distributed it, a company run from a back room in Clifton, could offer limited reach. But it existed. 1,200 people bought it. Not 1,200,000, not 12 million. 1,200 people who sat with those songs in their kitchen or on their commute or late at night when they needed someone to understand something. That mattered to Daniel. It mattered in the way that small, true things matter more than the large performances people mistake for importance. He kept making music. A second album in 2001, a third in 2006. He taught guitar on the side. He played local venues. He built a life around the music. Not a fortune, but a life. And throughout all of it, the question sat in the back of his mind. Who sent that envelope? He had theories over the years. A music journalist he had once spoken to at a gig, a teacher who had encouraged him at school, an uncle who had worked in America briefly and had never explained his finances very clearly. Every theory fell apart on examination. In 2015, a friend who worked in music licensing was going through old administrative records and found something. He called Daniel. "You need to hear this," he said. The connection, it turned out, had been hiding in plain sight. In 1995, Michael Jackson had been in London for the History promotional tour. He had attended a small showcase of unsigned artists that a mutual acquaintance had organized. A private listening event, not press, not cameras. Daniel had played 3 songs at that event. He had no memory of Michael Jackson being there. He hadn't known who was in the audience beyond a handful of faces he recognized. But Michael had been there, and according to the licensing records and a note that had been left with his personal attorney, he had asked for information about the young man who played the acoustic guitar. He had been given Daniel's name and address. 3 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Daniel sat with this information for a long time. He had been in the same room as Michael Jackson and hadn't known it. Michael had listened to 3 songs he had written in a flat in Bristol about his own life, about nothing anyone would ever have considered important, and had decided they were worth £5,000. Not as an investment, not as a business decision. The note had been typed on plain paper, no letterhead, no name, no credit. Michael Jackson had gone out of his way to ensure that Daniel Webb would never know who had helped him. The anonymity had been deliberate, intentional, a gift given in the purest sense of the word, with no expectation of return, no possibility of claim, no way to be thanked. By 2015, Michael Jackson had been gone for 6 years. Daniel could not call him, could not write to him, could not stand in a room with him and say the thing he had been waiting 20 years to say. He sat in his studio, the proper one he had built in the back of his house in Montpelier, with the money he had made from 2 decades of modest but consistent work, and he tried to understand what he was feeling. It wasn't grief, exactly. It wasn't even gratitude in the ordinary sense. It was something closer to the feeling you get when you realize that someone believed in you before you believed in yourself, and that they did it quietly, with no fanfare, with no desire for credit. He thought about Michael Jackson at that showcase. A man who had sold more records than almost anyone alive, sitting in a room with 50 people, listening to an unsigned musician from Barton Hill play songs about ordinary hours, and deciding those songs were worth protecting. The researcher who found the connection told Daniel there was evidence that this was not an isolated incident, that Michael Jackson had done similar things, quietly through intermediaries, through anonymous bank drafts and no-name envelopes, more times than anyone would ever know. For every story that came out, there were dozens that didn't, because he had made sure they wouldn't. Daniel Webb wrote a song in 2016 about the envelope. He didn't name anyone in it. He didn't explain the backstory in interviews. He called it Thursday in November and released it on a small EP that sold, by his own reckoning, about 400 copies. It was not about Michael Jackson. It was about what it means to receive something you didn't know you needed. The lyrics included a line that went, "Someone turned the light on in the hall. Didn't stay to see me find my way. Just made sure I wouldn't have to fall. Then quietly, they turned and walked away." He played it once at a small venue in Bristol. At the end of the song, he paused for a moment. He said to the audience, "This one's for someone who helped me when they didn't have to, in a way I'll never be able to fully repay." The audience clapped. They didn't know what they were clapping for. Daniel knew. He still has the original note in his wallet. The paper has softened at the creases, the typing has faded slightly, but the words are still there. "This is for your music. Don't stop." He has stopped trying to explain it to people, not because it doesn't matter, but because some things are too private to become a story. They are better kept close, used as fuel on the nights when the music doesn't come and the doubt comes instead. There is a version of Michael Jackson's life that is told entirely in stadiums, in record sales, in chart positions, in legal proceedings and tabloid headlines. That version is not false, but it is incomplete. The complete version includes the small envelopes sent to people who would never be on the cover of any magazine, the anonymous bank drafts, the letters written in the middle of the night, the phone calls made from hotels in cities where nobody knew his name would appear on a bill. These are the acts that cost something real, not money, because Michael Jackson had money. They cost attention. They cost the effort of noticing, of caring, of following through quietly when the world was not watching. Daniel Webb is in his 50s now. He still makes music. He still teaches guitar. He still plays venues in Bristol that fit 300 people. He has never been famous. He has never wanted to be. But his first album exists because a man in a room in London stopped and listened, really listened, and then did something about it. The question is not what Michael Jackson meant to the 80,000 people in a stadium. The question is what he meant to the one person in the room who didn't know he was being seen. Daniel Webb knows the answer to that question. He's been carrying it for 30 years. If you believe the measure of a person is found in what they do when no one is watching, subscribe and leave a comment about a time someone helped you when they didn't have to.